My name is Julie Davis. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program. First of all, I want to thank our volunteer program producers, Daniel Pacifico Kogan and Lewis Wheatley. Without the two of you, this program would not be possible. Since 1916, it has been part of City Club's mission to inform its members and the community in public affairs. Today, City Club is creating a dynamic, currently virtual, public square where conversations flourish and democracy thrives. Today's program is one of 10 virtual programs we're hosting this season, including 6 candidate debates for nearly every level of local and state government. All are online and free to everyone. Tonight, there are 2 key ways you can help to support City Club's programming. First, I'd like to invite you to become a member of City Club. There has never been a more important time for the work of City Club. You can learn more about membership at pdxcityclub.org. Secondly, whether you're a member or not, I'd ask you to make a donation to City Club. For nearly 100 years, City Club has relied on ticketed events revenue to fuel our work. But in this all digital world, we're taking a different approach. By making a gift of $5, $15, or $50 today, you're helping to continue to convene thought-provoking debates and conversations. You can donate now by texting Support City Club to 44321. That is Support City Club, all one word, to 44321. Whether you're a member, make a gift, share the link with a friend, or just watch tonight's program to get informed. All of us at City Club want to thank you for your participation. Thanks also to our amazing media partner, X-Ray FM, for broadcasting this evening's program. As you settle in to watch tonight's conversation, perhaps your cat or dog will join you, or you will have a little one who needs your attention. Perhaps you're watching the recorded version of this conversation while making dinner, or listening while weeding the garden. Wherever you are and however you find this, welcome. I'm so glad you are here for this critical conversation. And now, it is my pleasure to get out of the way and welcome Kem Melton to the screen. Kem is Chief of Staff to the Multnomah County Fair, a former education reporter for the Oregonian, and our esteemed moderator for this evening's program. Kem, take it away.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Julie, for that introduction and for putting that stage for us. I'm really excited to be part of the conversation today with an incredibly talented and passionate group of panelists. We could spend hours discussing, dissecting, debating, talking about areas of frustration and also areas of hope when it comes to our education system. We know that we cannot cover everything about education in this 1 hour, but we hope to leave you with a picture of some of the major issues and opportunities ahead for our children and our community. At their best, our schools have been called places of opportunity, that they level the playing field. They're places where we learn critical thinking, foundational skills, and grow in our abilities to reflect, debate, disagree, lose, win, and adapt. My grandmother taught elementary school for nearly 40 years. She integrated schools in Ohio when she started teaching. And whenever you talk to her about education, if you asked her to say, she would without question say the words that I've heard all my life. With an education, sweetheart, you can write your own ticket. And where access and quality are combined, those words can absolutely be true. But we know our education system, whether nationally or locally, has rarely fulfilled its promise to all children. children of color, children with disabilities, those who speak languages other than English, have been systematically left behind. And for those who already face an uphill battle with discrimination, housing insecurity, family instability, the education system has often had more successes that were the exception rather than the rule. And that was all before we met COVID-19. COVID has rocked even the stability and infrastructure we thought we had, and again, disproportionately impacted children of color and families who depend upon schools as a hub for access to food, technology, and other community services like mentoring and healthcare. And at the same time, the role of education is even more important than ever. Our communities are demanding change in our criminal justice systems, and we know that one of the best steps that we could take to prevent harm in our Black communities and other communities of color is to invest in the assets we know strong communities need. That means housing, that means employment, that means education. So where do we go from here? What have we learned? Can we build something better and stronger together? That's what this panel is here to discuss. And today we have the opportunity to hear from 4 incredible individuals. We have with us Andrea Valderrama. She is the board chair of the David Douglas School Board in East Portland and currently the advocacy director at the Coalition of Communities of Color. We also have with us Mercedes Munoz. She is the 9th grade community coach at Franklin High School and Oregon's 2020 Teacher of the Year. We have Erin Helgren. She's Children's Institute's Early Works Liaison at Yoncalla Elementary School and the P3 consultant and coordinator for the Yoncalla School District. And we also have Teresa Alonso Leon. She's an Oregon State representative for House District 22, which includes Woodburn, Jervis, and North Salem. And Representative Alonso Leon is Oregon's first Latina Indigenous chair of the House Education Committee in the state legislature. We welcome all of you to this place, and we will jump right in with a question for all of you. Would you share with us one thing that you've been grappling with in your role as you think about starting the school year, a challenge you've seen or experienced, and how do you think we should begin addressing it? Andrea, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you everyone for putting this together. I'm so excited to be part of this incredible panel. I also just want to acknowledge my little jefa here with me. This is my daughter, Rosalia, so you may hear her go in and out of the conversation. So, you know, for me, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been grappling with, particularly as a mom of color. For me, it's really trying to balance the financial stability that I think we all need right now with everything that comes with being a mom, a parent, in this COVID reality. So, for example, we are raising and teaching our of not only an unprecedented new first day or new school year, but in the middle of multiple different emergencies. As you mentioned earlier, Kim, a global COVID pandemic, anti-Black racism, the constant murder of Black men and women, Indigenous and Brown communities, and the economic and housing impacts associated with the first two. And you know what, I will also say that one of the things that I personally have most been grappling with are all of these simultaneous emergencies and how they are impacting me as a Latina, as a multi-generational immigrant household. And I do think that in the conversations that I've had, at least with other folks out here in outer East Portland, you know, these are experiences and emergencies that are really untenable. We're being kind of forced into very challenging circumstances, and all of them are impacting how we show up in any space. I also will say, as a school board member, you know, I feel like we're asking a lot of school districts in terms of childcare, food, healthcare, quality education, and we don't necessarily give them enough resources to do it on their own, right? We know that this has to be a collective effort, that there are so many culturally specific organizations, community members, leaders who also have to be part of the conversation. And so, a little bit in terms of how do we address it, and how do we try to kind of work through some of these really big items that we're facing as individuals, as leaders. For me, it's first and foremost always critical to say Black Lives Matter, and in our leadership, especially in policymaking, to institutionalize and start to deconstruct white supremacy and anti-Black racism in our policies, in our service delivery. And those are some of the things that I tried to do in my day job as well, in terms of providing resources to closing the digital divide. As we know, out here in my household anyways, I have that outer East Portland Wi-Fi that is really unstable, that, still costs quite a bit, but, still, has to get the job done. And those are really needs that a lot of folks are facing, like childcare and rent subsidies. I'll also just lift up preschool for all as another way to really start addressing this in a upstream approach, to make sure that we're really getting quality education for our youngest kiddos at a critical moment in time. And I'll just end by saying a couple of different stories and just experiences that my daughter and I have been facing even in the past couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, my daughter said that she didn't want to go on a much needed walk because she didn't want to get the coronavirus. And so we stayed inside again. And then last week, I told her she absolutely could not go outside when there were multiple trucks that pulled up next door with Confederate flags and other similar flags, talking about the caravan that they had participated in downtown the night before. And so I just mentioned these two stories again as examples of what we're facing right now, what I'm grappling with in terms of the needs that I know my daughter has in making friends, going outside, trying to protect her from a pandemic, and also addressing the realities of our neighbors, of our community in what is very clearly a global movement for Black lives, and doing what we can day by day. I don't think that balance really exists. I think it's about just taking everything as we can, as gracefully as possible.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate you taking that holistic approach of both your experience as a mother, your experience as a school board member, in a way that those have blended together for you. Mercedes, I will turn it to you. First day back at school today. Tell us a little bit about what you've been grappling with, what you see.
Hi, thanks for the welcome and introduction, and I'm glad to be here this evening. I would say, with today starting and leading the freshman teams at Franklin High School, saw a lot of concern and angst from parents, right? Like, how does my child log on? Where are we supposed to go? Dealing with some of the technology and the glitches, and recognizing that there is a digital divide and also language divide. I was very much concerned about our students who are multilingual, emerging bilingual, sometimes trilingual, and trying to navigate this system on the first day as a freshman in a new setting with people that you haven't met before. And so those things are pretty well stacked. I feel that teachers definitely have their work cut out for them. And I am always wondering about the possibilities of allowing experts to do their jobs and to do that well. How do we support our educators during this time to do the things that we are charging them with? I was very much concerned in the spring when I did not see students showing up, and looking at the intersectionality of those students who are impacted by disabilities, students who are students of color, and who are often managing the household while parents work outside. I think we have some very strong narratives in our society here locally that center a certain reality that is not the case for everyone. I was so glad to hear Andrea mention some of the multi layers, right, of being a working mom, being a Black woman in Portland. Clearly, when there are messages of anti Blackness, thinking about during the first week of PD for teachers, getting phone calls from my daughter who works downtown. Mom, can you call a Lyft for me? Mom, these people are circling around our building and have been doing so for 2 hours, and I am here with another Black male coworker. And I have to show up on camera in the morning and help coach and lead a team. When you think about the impacts of mental health for teachers, for parents, for students, right? These are the concerns that I'm grappling with, and I am trying to widen the exposure to multiple voices. We have to be able to see from multiple lenses during this time. And if we stay and remain narrow, we're going to miss so much of the, I think, opportunities and challenges that are available for us to collectively problem solve.
Thank you, Mercedes. I really appreciate what you've shared. And I think also calling us to look at things from an intersectional way and broaden our perspectives, because we know that education is existing in a larger landscape, not on its own. Erin, I wonder if you might want to tell us a little bit about what you're experiencing with the start of school in Yankala. All right. Well, Erin might have got a little bit disconnected from us. We'll wait for her to log back in and then we'll loop her into the conversation. I'll turn it over to Representative Alonso Leon. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing as you talk to your constituents and what issues you're grappling with as a state legislator.
Thank you, Kim. I think probably the biggest issue right now that all of us are grappling with is COVID-19 and the way it's impacted our communities, specifically our BIPOC communities, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Because I sit as the chair of the House Education Committee, I'm particularly mindful of how we need to teach, how we need to provide our, the best optimal education to our students, understanding that there are many challenges. I appreciate our panelists who spoke from their perspectives. I appreciate their lenses because that is exactly what we need to be doing and helping move our education forward is thinking from multiple lenses and multiple intersectionalities. We can't teach and provide education the way we used to. I'm an optimist, so I believe that this has given us an opportunity to reimagine what our education system should look like and should be about. What does it mean to have an education system that teaches or where we provide education from a anti-racist lens? What does it look like to truly be inclusive, to truly teach all of our children in the way that they learn, and that we prepare and support our teachers and educators and provide the skills and the training that they need to help all of our students. And this also means, how do we engage community in the way that we haven't before? How do we engage parents in a way that we haven't before? This is truly an opportunity for us, as I believe. We have systemically and historically worked in silos. Our P12 system has worked independent from community colleges and community college independent from universities. We no longer can afford to do that. We need to truly work in collaboration. I hear about our students graduating from high school or earning their GED and then going on to post-secondary and not being able to transfer all of their credits. That's unacceptable. Our students have studied hard so they could go into the career field they're interested in. So we need to connect. We need to have that connection where our education leaders and our educators, our practitioners, are talking with each other so that we can create a streamlined system. I want us to envision what it would be like to remove all those barriers that our kids who are in our K-12 system only think about going into apprenticeship, career education, technical courses, to four-year degree institutions, but not think about if, but when. So for me, I feel like COVID-19, while it's impacted our families and our community in such a negative way and scary way, it's also helping us to slow down and allowing us to really look at our education system differently, because we cannot go backwards, and I refuse us to go backwards. That is not an option. We need to move forward, but we need to move forward together, and we need to think strategically, and we need to think from multiple lenses, and we need to think about the student population we're serving and the students we have historically left behind before. And that will not happen again. We are going to work towards making sure that our education system is truly equitable. We talk about it really easy, but we now need to show it. So that's, for me, what I would love to see, things that we need to work on in respect to education and how COVID has impacted our education system. But there's a lot of work we need to do. And this means, having these broad conversations. I've held statewide conversations. I think been one of the few legislators who has had broad conversations with our leaders of color, our BIPOC leaders, and county commissioners. I've had conversations with our BIPOC leaders and our educators, our education system. I'm going to have one focus on K-12 in next month, I believe. So this is important. It's our time to really re-envision and reimagine what our education system should look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I want to kind of call out a couple of things that you raised that I think are important and will be themes. And I think one of them is that there's an idea, and I think we've all found ourselves saying it at various points over the last 6 months. When will we get back to normal? When will we go back to normal? And I think what you've said, Representative, and I think what all of our panelists have said thus far is that back to normal is actually not where we're trying to go. We're trying to go forward to a new place. And I think we don't necessarily know all the pieces on the road to get there, but we know that we need to go to a new place. So thank you for really reinforcing that. And I just want to note that we're going to try to bring Aaron back into the conversation. The internet at the school district down in Yankala has gone down, which in a town of 1,100 folks down there, and I think maybe a little bit emblematic of a digital divide sometimes that we speak about. So we hope to bring Aaron back into the conversation as soon as we can. And I want to call out one other piece that will lead to our second question. Is Representative, you've talked about this. How are we going to go forward together? So who's on the team? And I think there's always been conversation that educating our children and that parents are part of the team. They're part of that team that helps to educate their children. But parents haven't always felt like they're actually a partner and felt that and been treated as partners. So I'd ask, and I want to start with this question, start with you, Mercedes. How might we reframe the partnership between parents and schools going forward?
Thanks for the question. I think that parents have got to feel affirmed in their value as stakeholders, in their ability to offer a unique lens. They see their children often differently than we do in the community or in schools, and so they have unique insights. But when we're talking about folks who are coming from historically resilient but historically underserved places, parents from those communities haven't always been seen as assets. So we have got to see that they have value at the table, that they have things to contribute. When we're talking about forging a new way forward, we have got to be willing to hear some ideas that shake us up, that maybe challenge us, that challenge the status quo, that interrupt some ongoing conversations that we have had. And I'm going to put myself as part of the collective, though, even though it's not a part of my practice, right? To not include parents as valuable members of the community. I think in this time of COVID, we have heard from parents saying, you know what, I'm at home now and I am getting a chance to see what all the platforms are and what my kids need, and I am needing help. Who is going to go in and provide that coaching and that instruction? I have been meeting with other educators who have talked about volunteering in the community just on Saturdays. Like, let's meet in the park, let's set up a tent, let set up a hot spot and show parents, look, this is how you log on. Here's a chance to do Q&A with someone from your neighborhood and from your district. But I'm stretched pretty thin and I need people who are going to be willing to help me in that endeavor. But it is something that is heavily on my mind because I remember being that parent who was not included at the table and who was not always valued. So I think it has to start there, and it has to start with some honest conversations that, as Representative Leon stated, is not just lip service. We need to see action. And so if your actions are not aligning with the values that you're saying, I hear many people during this time saying, I have an equity lens and we want to be culturally responsive and we're going to adapt our pedagogy. But where does that align? It has to align with your actions, where words meet what you're doing, and what you're saying has to align. So that's what I would add to that part of the conversation. And thank you.
Thanks, Mercedes. Andrea, maybe I'd ask you, have you seen some examples, or what does putting action behind some of this lip service mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question, and I deeply appreciate the conversation around engagement. And I think first, I just want to acknowledge and give virtual hugs to all of the parents out there, especially, the moms of color. Same boat. I think it is just incredibly challenging right now with COVID reshaping everything about how we have been taught to be engaged in our children's lives and education. And I also just want to lift up that I live in a multi-generational household. My mom lives with me, and that's how we grew up. And my cultura and my community, it's not just our parents, right? But it's the wisdom of our ancestors, it's the wisdom of our elders who really support the development. It's kind of the village mindset as well. And so I do think in this question of who's on the team, it's the entire family. I am not just an individual. I am, part of my ancestors. I'm their dream, their wildest dream, come to life. And so I do think that we have to be, like Mercedes mentioned, we have to be really, really adaptable to what we are experiencing right now, which for me, in my case, is very much in survival mode. I know in my family, we're very much experiencing a lot of PTSD with a lot of the violence and just overall emergencies that we're facing. Folks have to be able to respond and adapt to that as parents who maybe are learning English, who maybe don't know multiple platforms, who are also trying to manage working full time and then a full time homeschool schedule, and so I do think that really defining out what a clear, accessible, and authentic engagement really looks like is really important, at least for the interim, and I think moving forward. And then, the last thing that I'll say too is that for parents, in terms of like advice, I think it is really important to be kind to yourself. I know I often am finding the mom guilt creep in at any hour when I am unable to get, lunch at the exact hour that I need, or when I am working late and tired in the morning and not able to play when I need, when, she's around. And so just being kind and gentle and understanding of yourself, but also to be really unapologetic in our use of addressing anti-Black racism, and what does it mean to show up and really be anti-racist as parents. Does it mean that we have conversations around pods, or does it mean that we have conversations around supporting and providing resources for folks who don't have access to Wi-Fi, for students of color? Does it mean that we're having conversations with our kiddos at rallies about what's happening? I mean, I think we have to be a little bit more awake than perhaps we have been in the past.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And both kind of the calling into where this current environment is calling parents into a different kind of engagement in their children's education, and also hopefully then a different way of defining what that relationship could be like. I don't know, Representative Alonso Leon, did you have something you wanted to add to that conversation?
Yes, thank you. Before I became a legislator, I worked with students and parents. I actually, back in my nonprofit years, I used to work for the Oregon Council for Hispanic Advancement, and I worked in the Portland school system. And I actually developed parent engagement programs and taught parent leadership and helped them know their own power and help them know how to advocate for their children, and also help them realize that if they made requests to the school system that their children attended, that people had to listen. And they didn't realize that, which helped me understand that there's a couple things that we need to do. One, we need to help our parents understand how to navigate our education system from a cultural context, from a cultural competency context. So not just expecting our parents to come to the school just because we tell them they're supposed to, but do that added work where you're making those phone calls and really truly helping our parents understand that they're valued and that their voices are really important, and that we need them to show up for their kids at school. And providing interpretation, translation services, providing childcare so their parents can be engaged and involved, offering food for those parents who, if this is something they're doing right after work, that's being offered. We need to truly be intentional about how we engage and involve our parents. I often think about my parents. I am an immigrant. And so which means that my parents, because we didn't have the experience of having another generation of people going through our education system. My parents had to learn on the fly. And so as the oldest in my family, I kind of became the second parent in my family, and really help my parents understand why it was important for them to be engaged. Something as simple as attending, a basketball game or attending a school conference, how and why that was important. But then when I worked for PCC, I also had students who were first generation college students, and they were struggling with their parents not understanding that they had summer and evening courses. And so then that helped me understand that because there's a likelihood that their parents didn't go to college in this country, so didn't know what it meant to go to college here. So then I created a parent engagement program where they went through college all in one day, and they took college classes. They got to know key people on campus. And we had a full graduation so that they could experience that as well. And just having them walk through the, even though it was a full experience, that experience helped them just internalize what it really meant to be a college student. And so that helped their kids in respect to communication and respect to, parents being more flexible with their kids, taking certain classes at certain times. Those simple things, while I think are simple, are huge for our parents. So we really, truly need to be intentional on how we do this, that we don't just say, yeah, we have a parent engagement program and we offered this and they didn't show up. We have to go beyond that, that initial invite. It has to truly be intentional.
Well, and I appreciate you raising up the intentionality, and also that notion that if you host something, people will show up to the school building. And now we're in a space where we don't have that building to rely on to say, just come to the building and then we'll explain everything. I actually think now we're forced into a different kind of conversation about how do
That's
you
right.
then push out that outreach to our parents. So I thank you very much for putting that on the table. I want to turn a little bit to the conversation to teaching and the profession of teaching. And we know that there's been a lot of conversation about what does it look like to teach in this new COVID environment. What does that mean for the profession of teaching? And so, maybe I would come to you, Mercedes, and start with you, who's working at Franklin High School right now, and say, is there something missing from this conversation about educators in the space of COVID-19, and what conversations we should be having about the way that the teaching profession might have to shift or change or be supported differently?
Thanks, Kim. So this is a multi-layered question. I think I'd like to start with just like the technical piece of like what it's like to teach in this environment. Just as even today, right, we had some experience with a glitch and someone's Wi-Fi went down, right? I think it's important as a community that we remember and that we remind ourselves that teachers are not like home teachers, right? We're at home trying to teach. So the same things that other people are navigating in their spaces, right? I had my grandkid running in this morning just a moment ago. I wanted to scream because my husband's behind me in the kitchen, and this is my work area. I found this little screen from the Goodwill, like, okay, it creates a barrier so that my family has some privacy and I have a space to be able to concentrate when I am engaging with students and families and colleagues. But those interruptions are not things that we could, that we would experience necessarily in a classroom, right? So we are all attempting to control the controllables and to put our best face forward. I truly believe that about my colleagues across this state. And I've been engaged with many of them in conversations, not all, certainly. We are here in, well, I'm teleporting here from Portland, but I'm hearing conversations from folks who are in Ontario, who are also in Hood River, folks who are in Woodburn, and they speak about some of the unique experiences with distance learning based on where they are even geographically in our state, and we need to keep that in mind. Some students are working from packets. Some students are being allowed into their buildings because their population is small enough to be able to accommodate that with the state guidelines that are there. So it's going to look different from virtual building to building, from virtual city to city, and town to town. And so I firmly believe that we need to respect, again, our educators who are trained to provide and deliver instruction, who are doing their best to adjust to new platforms, some who haven't had to do such in 15, 20, 30 years. Some of us who are newer to the profession, we've had access to technology and we know some of these different things and how they interface. So getting people up to speed. I think that people are under the impression, at least in my district, that folks were doing that this summer. There were many teachers who were trying to hone in on their craft, given the platform that we had known at the time in the spring, only to come back this fall and it's changed again. So once again, we are in the building virtually, right? Trying to fly the plane, trying to steer it, trying to co-pilot, right? Trying not to fly out of the windows, right? And trying to secure our own oxygen mask. That is a lot. And I just kind of want to hold space for that. And then our students, they want robust engagement. They are missing the social pieces. They miss their friends. They miss being able to come and get those hugs and that conversation after class, because the classroom and school community has been, for many students, a safe place. Not all, not all. And I have been very deliberate about offering that conversation as well, as people have rushed and said, oh, we've got to get back to school. We've got to get back to the building. Our kids need that, without recognizing that has not been the story for every child. So how do we bridge the gap? I am seeing a need for innovation, for children to be able to solve real world problems. In a math class, can I look at some of that COVID data? Can we look at some graphs and tables? Can we move some of those numbers around? Can we just make sense of it in a real world sense? In an English class, could I view maybe some footage of what is happening downtown and write a reflection that's meaningful today as far as what's coming up for me? But on the other side, I've got to have a teacher who's savvy enough to be able to negotiate some of those very difficult conversations that are going to require, right, an anti-racist lens. And that means that we have to be doing the work. We can't no any longer say, well, that doesn't really apply to me, or I don't really have those kids, as I have heard. These are our kids. They belong to us as a community, and it is going to be up to us to provide that robust learning experience, and to not assume that because kids are not in classrooms that they're not learning already. Cooking dinner, hanging out with my nieces and nephews, seeing some of my cousins, visiting some of the landscape here, that is learning. And we're going to have to make an invitation for all of it.
Mercedes, thank you so much for the way that you laid all of that out for us. I think especially I want to call out what you were just talking about in terms of the learning and the way that children are learning right now. And this idea that we might have to look at the world that they're existing in and that they're encountering as a learning experience. And then educators as well as parents are having to equip themselves to help our young people make sense of and become critical thinkers and evaluators and consumers of what's happening in our world, and then be able to engage in it. And that's a tall order for us all, because we all have a role to play in that, namely, but especially and parents. Representative Alonso Leon, I'd like to turn to you, and from your perspective, on the House Education Committee, what do you see as an opportunity to support the profession of education and teaching in maybe a different way from the state level?
Thank you. First of all, I have to say that I fully respect all educators. My teachers changed my life because of them. I'm where I'm at. And I completely can empathize with where we're at. We are asking a lot of our teachers. We are asking them to not only teach, but teach from an environment that isn't always friendly. And it is challenging times for everybody, especially our teachers. So we have to give them a lot of grace. As a legislator, I want to learn from you. I want to be able to advocate on your behalf from a policy standpoint. What is, I want to learn from you what we need to improve in respect to policies to support our teachers. We already know that we don't have enough teachers of color. We know that there's a correlation between our students' success, our students of color success, and our teachers of color. So we need to recruit more teachers, more BIPOC teachers specifically, to get into the teaching field. And then we acknowledge that there's even some challenges within that field and respect to preparing and getting them out to become teachers. So those are other areas that I am fully committed to help improve. But as we live in a time of COVID, it's imperative that all teachers and educators know that my doors are open and that I want to hear and I want to learn and I want to create an environment that will help you be successful and the way you believe we need to be. This is why I say my big vision around transforming our education system is really going to have to come from our practitioners who are doing this day in and day out. We don't know how long COVID's going to last, but we do know that the experiences you're having are going to help mitigate how we can improve our education system. So that's my invitation to all of our teachers is to to share your voices with me and help me better understand how I can help you. So, and that's from a policy standpoint. So, no issue is too small. I just want to acknowledge that. And so for me, I am ready to create opportunity for future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. I want to make sure that everyone heard that. The Representative Alonso Leon said, bring her your concerns, your policy ideas, your innovation. She is the House Education Committee Chair, and she wants to hear from you. So I just wanted to reaffirm that out there for everyone. And I appreciate you sort of stepping into the place around what we might reimagine our schools and our education system to look like. And that we both, while we're in a moment where we are both trying to survive, many of us are trying to survive both in a real way with our health and our lives, but also trying to survive and thrive in this current COVID education environment. We yet still have a moment and sort of an open door to say we can move into something new and something better. And so I'd like to ask all of our panelists that if there is something that you see that there's an opportunity to pursue in reimagining our education system, what could we go after? What could we pursue? And Andrea, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I love this question. And, I think there are several things that can be done. I think, one, I'll just kind of continue the thread a little bit of what Representative Alonso Leon was mentioning in terms of teachers of color, not only expanding how many we have, knowing the impact, not only to students of color, but I think all students of color and the lens and the educational opportunities and advancement that they make. But one of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is right now in the middle of conversations around reduction in force, how can we do justice and do right by our most recently hired teachers of color and support the development of our workforce equity plans, right? And this is where in David Douglas, we talk a lot about, to the credit of previous Vice Chair Stevens, how do we make the front end meet the back end, right? And I do think that that's a really big structural issue, right, that we need to address. Some of the other things that I know for me are really important are, it's very clear to me, universal childcare, universal healthcare are very essential in addition to universal broadband and the conversations around clearly a digital divide, even in outer East Portland, even in, Yoncalla, and all of these areas in Oregon absolutely needs to be front and center, in addition to, childcare, healthcare, et cetera. And the last thing that I'll mention is, really considering restructuring how we actually fund education in Oregon, and how our property tax system, measures 5 and 47 can be addressed, and really looking at, what is a more equitable way to match up everything that we're asking of teachers, of school districts, with the resources that we know actually are going to be adequate enough to meet those demands and the needs of our most vulnerable, our BIPOC students and families.
Thank you, Andrea. I like that list. We're going to keep adding to it. Mercedes, what would you like to add to this list? Reimagining.
In reimagining, I wonder if even the ways that we structure our schools, I'm thinking about working at such a large, comprehensive high school. And when I speak to students who leave our schools, sometimes for various reasons, but for the ones who do provide feedback, it's that they're opting for smaller learning environments that are more personal, that allow for that more community-based feel in a holistic way. I think as we're reimagining, right? What are the subjects that we're teaching in a robust way that include as many different voices and ideas that a student can get exposed to, right? Like that excites me. I left the row, right? But I also really enjoy reading Toni Morrison. And so how do we give students the essential skills that they need to be critical thinkers, to be able to say, you know what, I have a varied background and I can talk about Robert Frost and I can tell you about Sonia Sincernos, right? Like equally. So I think that those are some of the things. And as I've been listening to the panelists today, I am thinking about some of our white counterparts here in this city and state who may not understand the advocacy for BIPOC teachers, who may not understand why we are talking so much about equity in 2020. It's part of the landscape. It's part of the world as it is shifting and changing. And when I think about the relationships that I have been able to develop as a Black woman in Portland, Oregon, with with students from all different backgrounds, right? That is the validity, is that we are hopefully tearing down some of the social constructs around race that keep us divided and keep us entrenched. And working against our humanity and what's best about it. So when I think of reimagining, right, I'm thinking of students and parents and families who are proud to support this work and this state of bringing educators of color, knowing that it's to the benefit of all students, not just a certain population. And so I would just like to add that to the conversation, because I think it's important. I think sometimes it gets lost in our conversations, that people don't see the benefit for all. And it is a benefit for all students. When they can shake my hand at graduation and say, I love you, Miss Munoz, and we are worlds apart, different backgrounds, different ancestors who come from different ways, and to be able to see each other human to human and have that respect, that is what I hope for in reimagining for our world and for our education.
Thank you, Mercedes. Representative Alonzo Leon, I will turn over to you, and then we will take a few lightning round Q&As from our audience.
Thank you. I equally love this question because I am a visionary leader. And so I like to create this, what we could potentially become. And right now, our graduation rates among our different student populations is not equal. For me, I want to reimagine removing the barriers that keep our students from reaching their optimum. And to me, success will be when all of our students, regardless of what specific group they belong to, that they are all graduating at about the same rate. and that we look at our student populations, like our GED student population, our alternative student populations, and that we are paying equal attention to all of them. Right now, that is not, unfortunately. I'm probably the only or one of a few legislators who fight and advocate for our GED student population. And when I was a GED administrator back in 2014, 15, and 16, in 2015, I helped, I worked with the chief ed office to ensure that we envisioned what a program could be for our GED student population, because there wasn't a vision, there wasn't a program. The position of the administrator was really to oversee and ensure that students weren't cheating, that we had test sites and that students weren't cheating. That was it. And to me, that is not being inclusive of our student populations. You know, when I became a legislator, there is a stigma. There's still a stigma of our GED student population, and if it wasn't for me advocating, we wouldn't have GED students in our legislation and discussing all of our students, including our alternative students. That makes me really sad. And so it is really important that as we move forward, that we are inclusive of our entire student population, point blank. That's really important. We cannot leave anybody behind, period. And that includes making sure that we also have policies that support our LGBTQ plus student population. I am excited that ODE is working on some legislation for this upcoming session, which I am obviously fully going to support. But it makes me sad that it's taking us this long to even have identified funding for our African American students, for our Native American students, for our Latino students, and now our LGBTQ students. It is taking way too long, and it's time to change that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate the issue you put on the table. We have just a few minutes left, and we're going to pause briefly while we're collecting audience questions. We've got quite a few, and I'm going to take a minute to just let you know about the City Club's next event on Oregon's economy with the Multnomah County Chair Deborah Kafori, Rakaya Adams, and John Sapanya. And you also won't want to miss the City Club's debate series beginning on September 24th with the candidates for mayor. And so with that, I'm going to do a couple of lightning questions, one to each of our panelists. And I'm going to start with you, Representative Alonso Leon. It looks like Oregon is facing major budget cuts. What do you expect from the next legislative session?
Well, certainly we're all very concerned, but one of the things that is really incredibly important to me is to make sure that we conserve the current budget amount for our K-12 and higher ed. In this current session, as you all know, we left our short session without balancing our budget. And with our special session, we were able to balance our budget. And with the advocacy of myself and many other legislators, we were able to keep our education funding whole as much as we could. And my job is to continue to do that for the next biennium, is to ensure that we have the level of funding needed to continue with the work that we promised everybody we would do. So that is my goal in respect to supporting budget for our, not just our K-12 system, but post-secondary higher ed.
Thank you, Representative. Also, now our next audience question to Mercedes. You started to answer this before. Our audience member asked us what concrete things about the structure of education were broken before COVID and that we should change. They said, is it summer breaks or size of class or schedule? You mentioned a little bit about structure. Is there one or two other things you would say that we structurally need to look at?
Well, if we think of structurally what schools originally were designed to do historically in these United States of America, they were to create workers that were ready to go to the factory, who could do mostly reading, some math, right? And a little bit of writing, just enough to do the job. When I think of the words of one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, and his idea that public education was for the purpose of gleaning a few bright minds, a few bright minds, that includes the inherent assumption that not all the minds are bright and that not all of them are meant to come along. So when I think about upending some of the structural systems, I'm thinking about being more inclusive of all of the students that are served in our buildings currently or virtually, and making sure that those students and families feel as though they are assets within the building, that they are able and capable of learning, and that they could see themselves reflected in the curriculum. That hasn't always been done historically. So if I think of a place to start, it would be there.
Thank you, Mercedes. And our final question to you, Andrea. This audience member asks us about opportunities to support Black and Indigenous people of color who are interested in becoming educators. And they also say that Black and Indigenous people of color who are teachers, they need more support from our community. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know, one of the programs that we have in David Douglas is a Grow Our Own program where we have students who are interested in teaching, given an opportunity to move further into that career by getting connected with PSU and getting credits. So not only are we growing our workforce, we're a majority students of color district, so we're growing our BIPOC workforce, but we're also doing so in an accessible way. And we're also providing it specifically with the lens of meeting our workforce equity goals and supporting what students really want to see and believe in and be part of in their own career. I think in terms of how can we better support teachers? I think it's a great question that probably deserves further discussion. I think there's so much more that we can do, from not only giving them the resources, the financial resources that they need, but also just the actual in-classroom resources and community support. Teachers are absolutely lifelines. I know for me, in my own experience, they've been incredibly valuable and meaningful to me, and our teachers in David Douglas, and I know all around the country and in Oregon, are doing incredible amounts of work, incredible amounts of love given to all of our students and families, and that's really deserves as much support as we can give them.
Thank you, Andrea. And I want to say thank you. We've run a little bit over, but it's because this conversation, I think, was so important and also so good. I thank you for the ways that you have reminded us that we're going to a new place, that we need to start by creating that welcoming environment for our teachers, for our students, for our parents, to be able to thrive in the midst of this really an environment we never could have predicted. And that we will only get there by getting there together. We can't rely on our silos, and we can't go back. We have to go forward in a new way. So thank you very much, Representative Alonso Leon and Andrea and Mercedes. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Julie.
I think she's on mute.
Julie, we cannot hear you just yet. Well, with that, we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties. As Mercedes said at the start, we are all living in a new virtual world that we're navigating together. So we're sad that we don't get to hear some final parting comments from Julie, but I think if I know if she were here, what she would say, she would thank all of our panelists, and she would let us know that that City Club continues to provide all of these great quality in-depth information for all of us. And City Club continues to need all of our support. And so we encourage all of you to continue to stay involved and come to the next event and make your voices heard and learn new information. And with that, I would like to thank all of you one last time for your time, for your generosity, for your passion and your heart. And we say to all the students and parents and educators out there, we also thank you for doing what you do every day. So with that, I think we are adjourned.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.